Looks like we are live. Okay. All right, guys, welcome back to another class. If you're here and you're new, hi, welcome. My name is Nano. I'm going to be teaching you a lot of things today about Haven. I'm going to be showing you how spacing works and some things that you should know about controlling the map. Okay. Today's class is a little bit more important than the other ones as I do cover more basic fundamentals of map control. And with that, I'm going to be teaching you some other ways of playing the map that you can carry onto other maps. With this one, we're going to be mostly focusing on what it is to defend on Haven. And I'm going to be showing you 4 top positions that I believe are going to be really crucial for any player to know when they're playing. And I'm going to be giving you a couple of different things, such as what you should do when you want to play more aggressive or when you want to retreat. So you can have a multiple set of plans when you're playing with your teammates. Okay. Thank you for everybody that has been, subscribing and liking the videos. I do appreciate that. There's a lot of support going on around there. And if you want to share this video around for your friends, again, please do so. Let's move on with the actual class. I'm going to be showing you a couple of different things. Like I said, we're going to be showing you the fundamentals. I'm going to be talking about understanding Haven. And with that, you're going to be understanding other maps as well. I'm going to be showing you the 3/3, or at least the thirds system that you can use to kind of identify where fights tend to happen. And then I'm going to show you the positions with a little bit of a bonus at the end. So, before we get started, I'd like to, again, re-announce, I'm still taking students. If you're someone that has maybe hit a wall or you're looking for a one-on-one program with a coach, I do have positions open. You're more than welcome to join the Discord and ask questions as to how to access it, or you can just click the link in the description that I'm going to be adding. As for everything else, normally we see people improve within 3 weeks. Some people in 1, some people by the little, edging by the fourth week, but normally on average 1 to 3 weeks we see improvement. For anybody that's kind of curious about the pricing range is unfortunately going to be about $30-ish. So if it's a little bit out of your element, these classes are still free, so you can still ask questions when you do come in. But if you want someone that you want to chat with, 24/7, you're going to have support from me. Let's say you're playing a ranked game, you can ask questions. But again, all in all, I feel like it's a complete package. You get 2 sessions overall, and it basically fits in with your schedule. The last person that I had just recently got onto Ascendant from Diamond 2. So pretty proud of him. You can see he's had a great time on Icebox. Okay, with that out of the way, let's move on to the actual part of the video. One thing to remember is that I already covered 2 different maps. So if you kind of want to see some of the things that I've talked about previously, such as on Ascent, I talked about what makes a good position, or on defense, about sort of like gimmicks that you might have to consider when it comes to taking space, right? These are things that you have to kind of take into consideration when you're watching this video. I might touch on some of that stuff. So just as a reminder that these 2 classes do exist. When I was talking about this video, though, I talked about one particular concept. And that is that when I'm talking about a position, the player, aka the agent that you are choosing, changes the dynamic of the position. And this time, it's going to take a huge role in how we pick our position on Haven. So if you pick something like KJ as opposed to Cypher, it is going to dramatically change your position when you're playing the map. It's going to change how you like to reposition from point A to point B. And what's going to happen is when we're looking at these positions, you need to not only be aware of how self-sufficient you are by getting yourself out of tough situations, but also how self-sufficient you are in taking fights. And when we're looking at these positions, normally I'm going to be giving positions in terms of a player like KJ that doesn't really have that much self-sustainability, but can still play with teammates as long as they're communicating. So if you're someone that likes to talk, or you know that your mechanics aren't there, but you know how to communicate with people, you'll still be okay. As long as you keep those things in mind, you'll be okay. So that's basically just a reminder. I covered this previously. These are the things that you have to keep in mind. So let's talk about the first one. The first thing I wanted to talk about here is understanding Haven. And this is where the 3rd system comes in. When you are playing any map, the map is split into 3/3, okay? There is the attacker third, there is the defender third, and then there is the middle third. The middle third is where most of the fights tend to be happening. There's a lot of area where you have to contest, that you need to take in order to have more space. Normally, attackers want to take yellow. And what happens is these thirds are not going to be even. Now, when we're looking at thirds and you heard of fractions normally here, oh, this is even, right? The way that the maps are split, they're not necessarily even. You're going to notice that attackers don't really have a lot of space, whereas defenders do. And normally what defenders tend to do is that they see this massive space that they have to work with, and they think that they have a huge advantage. In fact, the more space you have on the defender side, the more spread out you're going to be. So on maps like something like Lotus, on maps like Haven, where you have a lot of space to cover, it becomes more problematic for you as you need to be more on top of things. When it comes to this map, there are some gimmicks with each individual map in general. Like for example, Icebox, there's a lot of corners and there's the zip lines. When it comes to a base, you can jump off the map, but then mid is kind of weird. Ascent, you have the doorways, we have the TPs with bind. There's always some sort of small gimmick that comes with the map. And this one was the first 3-side map. Now with the first 3-side map, it came with a little bit of a difference in how you hold space. So I need you guys to be fully aware of how much space you start with and how easy it is to lose. And because of that, I need you guys to also understand that this yellow space right here, the space that you have to contest, the space that you have to look for, is going to be crucial in how you play this map. If you're someone that never looks at the yellow, if you're someone that's never kind of tried to see what's going on in this space, if you're someone that doesn't ask for information in these areas or doesn't request anything, you're going to struggle. Because what happens is in a map that's 3-sided and you have a lot of space to work with, if you play a reactive role, if you play as someone that's just going to rotate and react when someone does something, you're going to have a bad time. And that's important when you're playing these maps. It is important for you to notice why these things are the way they are, and you need to understand why they're taking that position in the first place. If you're not contesting for that space, you're giving them free areas to work with and more breathing room. Don't do that. Okay, your job is going to be to punish attackers based on the vast amount of angles you have. You're going to notice that you have a lot of different spaces that you can kind of sit yourself down in and kind of play around. But again, it is important for you to note those things. Agents that can take advantage of verticality have more options to play with on the field. So if you have someone like a Jet or an Omen, you're always going to be able to have a slightly bigger advantage than someone who has, you know, maybe just a Rain of Phoenix and a Brimstone, right? You have more angles to work with, but that's something for much later. With the with the verticality and the 3/3 system in place, we now understand that we have a lot of off angles to play with, a lot of angles that are both vertical and non-vertical to play with, and that we have a lot of space to cover. So to avoid being reactive, these positions will take that into consideration as we need to fight for that space in some way, shape, or form. So let's talk about the first one. If you're someone that likes to play mechanically, if you're someone that likes to play aggressive, this is one of the positions that might work for you. This is different than someone that just wants to kind of see what's going on here and just kind of leave. Okay, you just are using this position in a way where you're always trying to create a cross and cause troubles for the opponent. So for example, when you're playing here, you want to hold your ground towards this area by long. Notice how when we talked about the thirds, the yellow area talked about this space right here. Your job is going to be mainly to try to find if there's opponents there, and if there are, you're going to contest them. Okay, so let's say for example you're here. One thing you can do is have, again, like I said, be in constant communication with your team. If you have an Omen that can play with you, either in some way, shape, or form, or you can have a cross here with another person. This person over here doesn't have to be Omen. It could be maybe, for example, Sova, right? You can have a Sova in this position, you can have Jet in this position, and as long as you have someone coming in, giving you a smoke, you can now play a cross. This is going to be a lot better, as you no longer have to deal with the problem of what happens if they take a long. Now they have to take short, now they can take sight, right? You no longer have to deal with this building snowball of effects because you gave up so much space. To me, this position is for any player that wants to maintain an impact in the round, and they're playing with somebody that they can trust. If you're someone that can easily get along with people and can easily kind of direct the field, this might be a really easy position to kind of play at the beginning. In fact, you can impress your teammates by creating these choke strats at the beginning of a game. For the beginning of a match, you can start easily by saying, on pistol round, let's create this type of choke play in case they come in. And this is going to give you a lot of space to work with. However, because it is an aggressive position and this is in the yellow, this is a contested spot. So make sure you're paying attention to things like Brimstone, to paying attention to things like other mollies that they might have. Another thing is Breach, right? If they have those sort of agents, just be mindful that you might be in trouble. This is an aggressive position that's going to cause a lot of demand for this space. But what happens if you don't want to play that and instead you want to play more passive? This is where the, again, position 1.5 might come in. You can play this position instead to still contest the yellow, but in more of a scout role position. You're going to be looking for things like jet smokes, cages from Cypher, stuns of any way. Maybe you've played this position in the past and now they're stunning it to try to catch you off guard. Darts, anything of that sort, maybe some sort of like sky flash, anything that's coming your way, anything that's going to be coming towards this area, you're going to be scouting for it. And the reason you're looking for that is because you're trying to identify what agents are in your position and what agents are going to be looking for you. You're essentially just taking inventory of what they're using and what they're planning to do. This is more of a scout position, and what happens is because you're not playing, maybe the aggressive plays aren't working, or maybe you don't really know what to do with that position, or maybe your omen is just way too far away, or you don't have an omen, right? Maybe they're not in a position to help you. You can play this position, and with this, you can actually retreat back and have a couple of different options. Depending on the rifle that you have, depending on the gun that you have, you can play this back position the way you want to. When you play back here, you can stay in this back area. Just be careful of mollies, nades, and all that cool stuff. As long as you're aware of those things, you can play this back area and play around this area by default, being able to take opponents as they push in. It's a bonus if you have any sort of flashes, so just keep that in mind. If you're playing like a Cypher, again, just keep in mind that they can still nade you and all that cool jazz. As long as you're aware that this position is highly traffic, there's high traffic in this area, you'll be fine. With this, you have, like I said, a couple options. You can still use this position to retreat, or you can use it to move into this back area by hell, or retreat all the way over to heaven. Both of these positions are viable. The first thing that you need to note is that if you decide to take hell, you actually have a bigger spot to play with in terms of range. So if you're someone that likes the Vandal, this is actually a good spot for you to play with because you can catch them as they come out while having a pretty decent off angle. What a lot of people tend to neglect, though, is that you need to hit your shots. If you're picking an angle that's a little bit farther away from space, for example, like this area of cover, natural cover, you're going to die. As long as you're mindful of that, you'll be okay. When it comes to the other angles that you can pick, you can always retreat back and you can always take heaven. I think that that is a really optimal position for people that just want to retake and just want to play off while just waiting for this smoke. Maybe they want to avoid an omen from TPing up there. This is also an option for you. I didn't really quite mention this, but graffiti is also an option for any player that wants to take this area over here. We're going to be talking about it in the next position, but when you're playing graffiti, you always have to be aware that this is a really powerful off angle position. But the issue with this off angle position might be that either A, they're going to be pushing you and you don't have really any idea of how to counter the flash, or you're really in a high dense position where everybody's already back sight and you don't really have any place to retreat. As long as you have some sort of, way to sort of measure how dangerous this position is at the time, you'll be okay. So let's say, for example, they're out of flashes, a perfect place to put this position right here. You have somebody playing across with you here, perfect place to put this position right here. If you're not playing this position because you're kind of like scared, that's also valid, right? There's a lot of things to keep in mind, but this is a really good angle, off angle position for anyone that's trying to catch opponents off guard and is trying to play with their team. Okay. That's both the passive and the aggressive ways of playing a long. If you're someone that likes more high-octane gameplay, then I would recommend something like a short. There's something a little bit more to be desired with the way that you can play this angle. It's going to come back to the same thing that we talked about normally with just the A long play, but there are some variations. Depending on what type of agent you are playing, you can do a lot of different things. So for example, you can start really easily here and just kind of swing out. Be very, very mindful of anybody that could be in the back rafters over here, as they can actually easily hit you and you have to deal with like 10 different positions to put your crosshair on. Your job is to stay highly mechanically trained to be able to deal with 1, 2, 3, 4, and potentially 5 angles when you're swinging. So people that are really good at taking these fights always have to be mindful of those areas. If you're someone that doesn't like those angles and you're someone that doesn't want to take those fights, that's completely fine. You can always, again, keep this position back here, or you can pick this one right here where you can instead play across with your player that's back sight, and you can use this to your advantage when they decide to push in. It's a great way to divert splits, and it's a great way to kind of stop splits from happening. And if you're playing someone like Jet or Omen, you can just take high ground, which we'll be discussing with a smoke that you can use to sort of like block this off. When you're playing, again, just keep in mind that you always have the option of looking for information. So if you see no one in this area, you can always use this as a green flag to push up and just press go. right? Try to use this as a way to kind of scale up, make sure that you're using your edges here to kind of like stay under cover in case someone decides to push up in that meantime, and always make sure that you're listening for any players that are towards mid. If they're already taking space by seeing garage and you're deciding to push, I would recommend that you kind of just step on the throttle a little bit and just kind of start pushing, because I see that a lot of people stay walking, and even though people are pushing towards C, they're still walking around this area. It's too late for you to kind of walk. There might not be a timing that you can catch unless your team can delay them. So I would just suggest to push. Other than that, the retreat positions are pretty much the same, and there's not much when it comes to how you're going to be dealing with this. So I would just recommend either use this if you want to get a first blood and you want to make sure that you keep some sort of impact there. But other than that, the defense is pretty much the same from both a passive and aggressive A-long player. So you have the same options. When we're looking at C-back site, to me, that is the position that any player would pick if they are struggling in the match. If you're someone that's struggling, or you're someone that likes to really just stronghold an area, I would always say go to C. The reason for it being is that A, while it is very difficult to retake, losing sight with a player is already really bad. And you're going to notice that the aggression that I did on both A short and A long were both kind of equal importance in terms of how strong mechanically you have to be. You don't have to be that strong for C. You can surprise your opponent with really strong plays. So for example, what happens is that you're going to be mainly stay in this back area, which is really easy to retreat from and really easy to dodge and destroy utility. But when you're playing in this position, you can always jump peek this area. So again, there's no question marks, there's no problems of what's going on towards long, and you can still contest that space. When it comes down to actually fighting, you have two options. You have the retreat that I just mentioned, or you can use your controller, or you can be the controller itself, depending, and split sight. Splitting sight is the act of course, putting a smoke right down the middle and splitting the sights into one half and then the next, that back half being the one that you control the most. And this is a great way to kind of deter opponents on the attack side from pushing onward. What a lot of people will do is that they'll see the smoke and they'll either think that they can push onto the smoke and then maybe potentially flash out, but they don't really take into consideration how open this space is for them to push in. So normally they'll stay back there or just lurk into the smoke. So what happens is if the enemy is pushing in and you decide to put the split smoke, you now have three different options. You can take a little bit of a high ground area and take logs. You can push in and maybe just kind of catch them as they push out. Or my preferred angle, just take this plat area and just kind of deal with them as they kind of come out, as you have more space to work with and more cover to play around. To me, this is kind of an optimal angle in case you want to always catch opponents off guard. As anybody that's playing here, if you're someone that likes to play Sentinel, you're probably going to have a really easy time. Do not underestimate how strong this sight split is. So even if you're someone like Cypher and you don't really want to, maybe contest, or you want to play off of the trips, this smoke can still help you as you can still lurk inside. Okay. If you're playing someone that's a little bit more agile like Jet, you can still use these smokes over here to sort of create some sort of like some space split, and you can use that with maybe, for example, somebody can play up here and play with you, or you can just use that position to sort of like updraft with knives, right? The spacing that they're losing right there is going to be really good. Do you believe that Cypher Cage could be used in replacement? Yeah, of course, you can do that. You can actually use, maybe for example, a trip here. There's actually a really good trip that goes right across here. If you kind of look at site setups with Cypher, there's a really good trip that goes across this area, and it's actually really good at catching opponents off guard. And you can use it in conjunction with a site split with a cage. And this is what I was talking about normally, when it depends what the agent that you're playing might change the dynamic. So you're going to notice how Jet can split site themselves with the smoke. It's going to be short-lived, but it's still there. But someone like KJ can't. So depending on who you're playing with, you're going to have to change the way that you are kind of attempting to defend the site. So in the position of Cypher, yeah, you can definitely 100% split site for yourself and then just kind of delay so your controller can either come over here or send the smoke your way. Not to mention that the cage is going to keep them back because you're going to be able to hear the noise. So in case you need to play off of that, you can actually do that. But that actually comes into segueing the next one. And this is actually where that kind of ties in. So you're going to notice, right? You're actually ahead of the game there. So 3.5 is to play plat. I was about to not consider this position just simply because there is something to consider when it comes to playing this area. Normally when I give positions, I kind of give them with the intention of making sure that anybody can play them, but this one right here is still too powerful to ignore. There's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind when you're playing this area. It is an incredibly aggressive position with a lot of high risk and a lot of high reward. The way that you need to play it is you're basically going to be doing a double setup where you're going to be playing with your garage player with the intention of holding crosses and catching opponents off guard. Normally, since you're the first point of contact, these guys can just stay back. Maybe they'll be smoked off. There's really nothing for them to worry about. So when you make contact, you can actually use that position to have them take the fight, or you can just take the fight yourself. However, you are very vulnerable. You're going to notice that you take two angles at once. And this is where you have to, again, talk to your controller. If your controller is someone that likes to be very responsive with you, then this might be a great position for you. You can use this time to, for example, set up an aggressive smoke early on, and you can use that to try to catch opponents as they like to push out. You can also use that in tangent with different setups. So for example, if you're Cypher, you can use these cages to, again, making sure that this controller doesn't use up all of their smokes, trying to defend C for you, right? So if you're someone like KJ, this position might not be as powerful just because you don't really have that way to kind of get out. If you're someone like Jet, if you're someone like Reyna that can just get a kill in this Miz, Yoru, any character with high mobility or some sort of bailout utility, you'll be fine playing this position. And again, still communicate with your controller. But if you're not someone, again, if you're someone like KJ, maybe you're someone that doesn't have that utility, you might struggle a little bit more. Is it still a really powerful position regardless? Yes. Use this in conjunction with ops, use this in conjunction with anything that has really high fragging power or anybody that has really high fragging potential, and you'll be fine. This is one way to play more aggressive on C if you're someone that wants to be more impactful than just give information and you want to get kills. If you're someone that wants to continue getting frags, this is the spot for you. And like we just touched in that question, yeah, of course, you can put a cage right here. You can use it, like I said, you can use it as a way to kind of retreat out, or you can use it as your way of kind of getting into a prime position for your controller to then send the split, and then you can kind of play off of it, very similar to what we saw in that first slide. Okay, so there's a lot of options here. There's a lot of different ways in which you can play this one. And notice how we went from playing backside, being safe, playing with your team, to someone that knows what they're doing and wants to use that position to their full advantage. And depending on who you are, depending on what agent you're playing, as long as you consider those two different dynamics of playing this position, you're going to have a really easy time on C. So Garage, 2 players, is a really powerful position for a couple of different things. Number one, Garage is actually really strong at holding not only a really strong piece of position, like a space, for example, over here. So it's not only really good at holding space away from opponents because you can catch them early on, but it's also really good at preventing splits towards C. We talked about how dangerous it can be to play in a bad position on C. For example, you get caught on plat, you're now dealing with 2 angles. Well, Garage is really strong at holding that. The problem is that if you're someone that wants to maintain some sort of impact and you want to maintain a lot of control on the map, I wouldn't recommend Garage. Let someone else take it. Reason being is that unless you are prepared and as long as you have some sort of plan in mind, you're going to be catching yourself in this position like this Reyna, where they're playing this position, they're holding this angle, and then they're going to get smoked off. Now, what does this smoke mean? Are they already pushing Garage? Are they hovering by grass? Is there no one there? There's a lot of question marks that get opened and you don't really know what to do with that. And the only real way to do anything about it is to either have someone with information use utility to kind of deal with these question marks, which again, let's say for example, you send a dart, they could be back here and they dodged it, or they're here and they shoot it and then they leave. The question marks are still there, right? You're still dealing with a lot of problems. And what happens is that, again, you can use utility to try to get rid of these question marks, but you're still going to be caught in this position where you still have to wait for the smoke to drop, or you might have to invest on a full flash and pushing in to deal with these question marks yourself. If you're someone that likes to play Garage, there's nothing wrong with it. There's just a lot of questions that you have to kind of answer when you're in this position. If you're someone that says, I don't mind, that can jump in and still get frags, then by all means, I'm not going to discourage it. I just think that there's better positions to play that you can still be impactful on and can still do way more in terms of what you can do. Okay, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think retaking from a Garage play is good. And I think that any player that's still in Garage is still impactful in some way, as they still have to prevent players from pushing up into B or into C from CT. So I think that they still hold some sort of role, but I don't think it should be left up to you, someone that's here trying to watch and learn about being more impactful in the game. Okay, leave it to somebody else. Maybe leave it to somebody that just wants to stay on the back seat of things. That's fine. Just let them have it, let them control this space, and be mindful of anybody playing this position, because you're going to notice that they're going to get bored with the smoke and they're going to leave. And if you're playing around both B and C and they leave that position, you are in danger. So look at your minimap, pay attention to that. While it is a position that you can't really do much with, it still needs to be filled, and someone has to take it. With that out of the way, let's talk about what I believe is my favorite position. This is not only the best position for anybody that wants to stay impactful to play, it is also the most overloaded. This is the position that you kind of need to be really in tune with your game sense and your mechanics. I've talked about positions that really mechanical players can always play, and this is one of them. B, to me, is the position that can stay the most networked. It's also the easiest, in my opinion, to hold as long as you have a decent plan in mind. And it's also the best one to use if you want to stay aggressive. I mentioned this at the beginning. You do not want to stay in a reactive state. You want to make sure that you're changing things and changing the flow of information back and forth. So what you can do is you have a couple of options. If you're someone that's playing with a controller, you're the controller, or you're duoing with a controller in general, you are always able to use this smoke right in the center. And what this allows you to do is not only to push up as the question marks are there. Are you taking that space? Are people pushing up from Garage? There's a lot of questions that get opened. And normally the way that they like to push out of that smoke is to either jump out on the left or on the right. When you're playing B, you have two prime positions to start with to not only catch these players as they jump out, because again, unless they shoot you in the air, or unless they get lucky on the landing, they don't really have a lot of fighting room, right? So you can kind of use this to sort of expect the jump over here and just do a small flick, or just kind of have the crosshair placement ready, and you can get easy frags. You see this all the way, okay? All the way up in Immortal. I've seen this a lot. Players think that they can just aggress out of a smoke, or maybe they'll do a flash that's easily dodgeable and they'll get caught off guard, okay? So these two positions over here are really good at dealing with people that are scaling on both angles and catching anybody that's jumping out of this of the smoke. Let's say you don't want to use that smoke and you still want to play back. You still have a lot of space back here to kind of play around in case they do want to push it around B. And you're going to notice that it's kind of like an ebb and flow of information. You want to check who's scaling up. You want to see who's playing back here by the headshot by the box. You can kind of keep moving back and forth, and you're kind of just rocking with the motion of who are you able to see, where the noise is happening, and where a lot of the utility is being played. If you're someone that's noticing that they're in danger, regardless of the position you're in, you always have a backup spot. You can always leave, and you can always instead, if there's a smoke or some sort of utility, maybe you're playing with a KJ, Cypher, whoever, you can always use that to instead scale up and use that as an off angle not one-on-one. You can use that as an angle for maybe a one and done. Okay, so you have a lot of options on B. The last thing you can do is you can always also scale up. If you're someone with a teammate that's really aggressive, I would recommend that you both kind of push out, as both of these positions can be done at once. One of them is watching out for the jump out. One of them is watching for anybody that's playing over here on the right. Watch out for this area by the hay bale. Watch anyone with jumping out. You can always get free headshots. So I think that there's a lot of things that you can do with this angle. If you're someone that wants to remain really impactful, or maybe you're on your Reyna arc, talk with your controller and take this space. It's really, really, really strong, and you're always going to find something. But if you're not strong mechanically, there's going to be things like, for example, someone swinging you out in mid, and you're just going to lose the 50-50. So again, things to consider. This area is wall bangable, so if you're someone that wants to spam with a teammate, also a possibility. Last but not least, if you're a Jet, you can actually expect these swing outs by having a player on the top. That could be you or the Noman, and you can have someone at the bottom here. This is what we call a high-low. Okay, high-lows exist everywhere in this map, but they're really powerful on B. And they're actually easier on B than any other, just because there's a lot of different places that you can be standing. You can be standing by this area, by the gong area, right? Shield, if you want to call it that. And you can stay up here. Controllers can also use this space. Omen can use this space kind of to either kind of play around. He can TP up there. There's a lot of options. In my opinion, this is perhaps one of the most impactful. So if you're a controller, or you're sort of like a duelist that wants to maintain a lot of impact, this is a prime spot for you. If you don't really want to play aggressive and you just want to play back, that's still fine. this is still a fine position to play. The one thing that I'm going to note is to never go to shield. This gong area, backside area, is actually a trap that I see a lot of players falling for. You don't have any breathing room, you can't get anywhere, and you basically are going to have to fight. And if you don't win that fight, you just died for free. Whereas you can play over here with your team, and you can still live regardless of the situation. Do not fall for this. This is actually a trap, okay? Don't actually think that, you just have to be better. It's just genuinely a trap. And against a good team, you're just going to lose, okay? Like 9 out of 10 times, you're just going to lose at this position. So again, you can still win mechanically, but I don't really recommend it. So with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the bonuses. So we talked about that smoke earlier when we were playing short. If you're someone that likes to play a little bit more vertically, maybe you're like the Omen, maybe you're playing with a Jet, right? Anything in general, you can take this top position up here. I've actually seen some cases where people are able to make the jump with Neon. So maybe if you have a Neon that's a little bit more risky, you can always make this jump over here. And the way that it works is simply, a lot of people tend to put the smoke a little bit up here that's a little bit flush with the angle. Putting the smoke sometimes a little bit farther back gives your team a little bit of space because these guys up here cannot see what's going on site. Normally what happens is you have a really easy angle for any player that's coming in towards short. So if you want to catch players off guard, you can always use this angle to catch them and making sure that you're using the verticality to your advantage. Remember, if you're going to react, make sure that you have a plan. So this is one of the smokes that you can kind of use. There's other things that you can do in general with the map, but I feel like this one is really important to note. The second thing is, if you're someone that has a lot of verticality, for example, your chamber, your Jet, updrafting, Omen, right? Maybe you have a way to kind of get up here with Neon. There's a lot of different things you need to kind of keep in mind. And the first thing is that you can actually just start any round with a verticality advantage. Just staying at a higher ground than the opponent expects gives you an off angle that they will never be able to expect unless you've done it in the past. Combine that with multiple opponents being able to kind of hold this, and you swinging onto like multiple opponents is just going to deal a lot of damage regardless of the situation. So what I expect a lot of people to do is that if you're not really starting high ground in any of these positions, then that means you're not really using the map to your advantage. If you're not asking your team to play for those positions, you're not really using that to your advantage. I've seen KJs even put turret up here to be able to play some sort of cross, right? As long as you're using these things to your advantage and you're always using one, every so and so, you're always going to make more impact than if you were just on the floor, okay? Use these angles when you're trying to retake. For example, maybe you want to deal with anyone back there, jump up, try to see what's going on, right? Always keep an eye on these angles. They're really, really strong, okay? So with that out of the way, we're pretty much done. I'm going to conclude the class here. If anyone has any questions, this is a good time. I'm going to be closing the class. I'm going to close off the recording. For anyone that's out there at home, thank you for watching. The next class should be coming out either this Friday, or we might change something up and we'll do something on Tuesday. All right. Thank you guys.